Harry Truman went from not even knowing about the development of atomic weapons to using them in force to end World War II in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The 8 things that I'll mention in this video will completely change your perspective on Harry Truman. You know many things like the Truman Doctrine and using the atomic weapons, but what about the most forgotten war in American history? There's plenty to unpack, as well as much more through Truman's life, legacy, and presidency. But before we go further, if you've been enjoying my content recently, please subscribe to the channel, as it is the very best way to support the work I do for these videos. I greatly appreciate it, and if you've already done so, thank you. Now let's jump into it. First up, the end of World War II. In August 1945, Truman made the monumentous decision to drop atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He believed this action would force Japan to surrender quickly, ending World War II and avoiding what could have been a long and deadly invasion of the Japanese mainland. The bombings killed over 100,000 people instantly, while many more died later from radiation exposure. Supporters of Truman's choice argued that it saved countless American and Japanese lives by shortening the war. Critics, however, believed Japan was already close to surrender and that the bombings were unnecessary and inhumane by Truman. The decision marked the first and only time nuclear weapons were used in a war, introducing the world to the dangers of atomic power. Truman's choice remains one of the most debated actions in U.S. history, symbolizing both the end of World War II and the beginning of the nuclear age. Number 2, the Truman Doctrine. The Truman Doctrine, announced in 1947, was Truman's plan to stop the spread of communism after World War II. It began when Truman asked Congress to give aid to Greece and Turkey, which were facing pressure from communist movements in the Soviet Union. Truman argued that the United States had a duty to support free peoples resisting oppression, making this a major shift towards active involvement in world affairs. The policy marked the official start of the U.S. strategy of containment, aiming to limit Soviet influence during the Cold War. Many saw it as necessary to protect democracy and prevent another global conflict. Others worried it would drag the United States into too many foreign conflicts. The Truman Doctrine became a cornerstone of foreign policy for decades, shaping how the U.S. responded to communist threats around the world. Third, the Marshall Plan. Introduced in 1947, was a U.S. program to help rebuild the devastation after World War II. Named after Secretary of State George C. Marshall, it provided over $12 billion in aid to Western European countries. The goal was not only to repair economies and infrastructure, but also prevent the spread of communism by promoting stability and prosperity. The plan encouraged cooperation among European nations, leading to stronger political and economic ties. Many Democrats praised it as a generous and strategic act that helped Europe recover quickly. Some argued it was too costly or mainly served U.S. interests. Overall, the Marshall Plan became one of the most successful foreign aid programs in history. Fourthly, desegregating the armed forces. In 1948, Truman took a bold step towards civil rights by ordering the desegregation of the U.S. Armed Forces. Through Executive Order 9981, he declared that all service members should be treated equally, regardless of race, color, religion, or national origin. This was a major change, as the military had been racially segregated for decades. Truman made the decision despite strong opposition from some political leaders and military officials. Supporters saw it as a moral and necessary step toward equality, especially after African American soldiers had served bravely in World War II. While it took several years to fully integrate the military, the order set an important precedent for ending segregation in other parts of American life. Truman's action is a major federal move towards civil rights in the 20th century. Number 5. In 1948, the Soviet Union blocked all roads, railways, and waterways into West Berlin, hoping to force the Allies out of the city. In response, Truman and the United States launched the Berlin Airlift, a massive operation to supply the city entirely by air. For almost a year, American and British planes delivered food, fuel, and other necessities to the citizens of West Berlin. The effort showed the U.S. commitment to protecting democracy and resisting Soviet pressure during the Cold War. Supporters praised it as peaceful, but a firm way to answer Soviet aggression. There was fear of widespread conflict, but the Soviets eventually lifted the blockade in 1949. The Berlin Airlift became a powerful symbol of Western resolve and Truman's determination to stand against communism without starting another war. Sixth up is the most forgotten war in American history, the Korean War. The Korean War began in 1950 when North Korea, supported by the Soviet Union and China, invaded South Korea. Truman quickly committed U.S. forces to help South Korea under the banner of the United Nations, seeing the invasions as a test of the U.S. policy of containing communism. The war was brutal, with heavy casualties on both sides and devastating destruction on the Korean peninsula. At first, UN forces pushed the North back, but Chinese intervention turned the conflict into a bloody stalemate. Truman faced criticism at home for not seeking a formal declaration of war and for refusing to expand the war into China. The fighting ended in 1953 when Dwight Eisenhower took office, but no official peace treaty was ever signed. The Korean War cemented Truman's willingness to use military force to stop communism, setting a precedent for the future Cold War conflicts. 7th, in 1948, Truman made the historic decision to recognize the newly declared State of Israel just minutes after its independence was declared. Truman believed that supporting Israel was a moral duty, especially given the recent horrors of the Holocaust and strategic moves in the Middle East. His choice faced strong oppositions from some advisors who worried it would damage relations with Arab nations and threaten access to Middle Eastern oil. The recognition gave Israel immediate legitimacy on the world stage and strengthened ties between the U.S. and Israel. Critics argued it complicated U.S. diplomacy in the region, while others saw it as a courageous act of principle. Finally, the Fair Deal was Truman's set of domestic policy proposals aimed at improving the life for Americans after World War II. Announced in 1949, it called for higher minimum wages, expanded Social Security, national health insurance, and stronger civil rights protections. Truman also pushed for more federal aid to education and housing to help returned veterans and growing families. Supporters believe the Fair Deal, built on Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, continued the fight for economic and social justice, although not all of his reforms succeeded. Truman's Fair Deal shaped future debates about the government's role in helping citizens. I hope the 8-point legacy of Truman was insightful. Truman is remembered for his decision to drop the atomic weapons, but I hope you learned something from the video. Last week I published a video about the man who many consider the third greatest president in American history, Franklin Roosevelt. Click here to learn more about FDR. Thank you for watching and have a good weekend.